Good evening. Welcome to Reality Check. And this has been a week where there has been some pieces of good news for the economy, specifically when it comes to ease of doing business, where we've seen that big jump, 30 points, 30 ranks, in fact, jump for India in ease of doing business, reaching approximately 100. So that's one piece of news that is coming up. And then just a week before demonetization, data showing that there has been a growth in the total number of e-transactions that are actually taking place. The growth in value, not quite as much as the growth in actual transactions, but there have been really distinct movements up there. So we're being joined by a really fantastic panel of experts right now to tell us what all of this means for us and for the economy in general. So we are going to be joined in just a couple of minutes by Professor Arun Kumar, M.K. Venu, both of them here with us. Bipin Preet Singh, founder and CEO of MobiKwik, is going to be joining us. Prashant Kumar Roy, who's been tracking e-payments in particular really closely. But before I come to any of you, it's great to get a view directly from the government. So we have two of the government's top thinkers on economic matters. Dr. Surjit Bhalla is joining us, who's now a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. And in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be speaking to Amitabh, Kant, the CEO of Niti, Aayog, who's been working very aggressively on this, and including writing articles on how India can actually break into the top 50 on the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index. But Dr. Surjit Bhalla, let me start with you. Getting into the top 100 is obviously a noteworthy achievement, but clearly still a lot more needs to be done, specifically in areas like contracts and how do you get those enforced, how you can start a business where India still ranks lower. How would you analyze this jump of 30 points, 30 ranks?
Okay. Right now I'm in the process of actually trying to compare it on a historical basis, but as to how good the India's performance is. But let's just look at this year. It is remarkable. Really, it is one of the top 3 or 4. And as you said, the movement of 30 points is not a small movement on this index. That's a rank. And there's, the most interesting part about this change is that it does not include the improvement in ranks that will come out next year, because it does not include GST. So now think about it, that basically next year it's likely to be, and people will start calculating, but we will be around 70 or 80, given the importance of GST to the entire macroeconomy of ease of doing business. So this is really, it's one of the sharpest moves on any index, any economic index that we can think of.
But there have been negative.
All congratulations to the government.
Yeah, but there have been negative movements also, which have been equally sharp. So, good news. We've just had that big drop in the hunger index. We had a drop in a couple of other indices, which have been less good news. This is the.
No, wait. Sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt, Vikram. But the hunger index I tried to show, as produced, is one, garbage, and second, that if you correct for it, and this is all publicly available article, that India has done rather well. And while we're on the hunger index, let's take hunger, poverty reduction, etc., that this really has nothing to do with the present government. Most of these indices, poverty in particular, and also hunger, pertain to the period prior to 2014. And if you do that, I'm saying that the period prior to 2014, for which these numbers show that we have done badly, indeed we have done very well.
Right, but I mean, Dr. Bhalla, I guess you could always argue that maybe some of the reasons why India is moving up right now are also things that predated. So you've got to take the take the good with the bad, I guess, to some extent. But if I could just ask you,
whoever said you shouldn't take history into account?
Yeah, so let me just ask you, some of the areas where India is ranking really badly, and I'm putting some of it up. Construction permits, ranking 181, enforcement of contracts, 164, starting a business, 156. These are really areas that shouldn't be that big a problem. Registering property, 154. Fixing these shouldn't be that difficult. I mean, why can't we have a simpler way to start a company? I mean, like, what is so difficult in that? Why can't we do a e-issuing of contracts, construction permits? I mean, these are things that should be relatively easy to fix.
Yeah, I think so, and that's why I'm very, very optimistic on whether it's this index, and we can talk about others, but specifically this index, about what's going to happen. I mean, remember, Vikram, we forget, there was just a year ago that our great country introduced a bankruptcy law for the first time. I mean, just think how far we have come, or wait, how low we can begin from where we began. A country, a major developing country, did not even have a bankruptcy law.
Okay.
That to me is one of the biggest achievements. And we can say that, clearly people have talked about the need for bankruptcy law. You've talked about it, I've talked about it, everybody's talked about it. We have to congratulate this government for finally getting the political will and passing it in Parliament. So but that is a huge, huge achievement. And wait, and therefore, the several other things that you're talking about, absolutely, it's a shame where we are. And I hope that that's what will improve rather markedly over the next couple of years.
Right. So finally, like one of the other areas which we could potentially move, because obviously, no matter how far you move, there's obviously a lot more still to be done. You could say it's great we've come from 130 to 100. Somebody else will say that really we should be targeting the top 50 or the top 10. In a couple of minutes,
absolutely. I'm saying we should be targeting the top 50.
Okay. So for that, other areas which could potentially be really simply done, things like this, and Amitabh Kant has written about it in the papers on occasion. Like, why can't we just simply, we have all this e-payment, and the whole logic of demonetization, which we will be celebrating next week, was to move to more and more digital. But you're still having a situation where land records, for example, in this country, are still in that ancient format, which means it is so difficult to actually transfer land back and forth. If we could digitize all of our records, have a way of having those in some electronic lockers, it's the logical way of, it's the simplest way to do digitization, which can make it so much easier to do business. Buy and sell land, it can happen overnight.
Yeah, and I don't see that date. This is not, we are being futuristic. I think that date is very close when we will be able to do that. And it's an absolute shame that we haven't been done it till now. But really, the opening, I think the bankruptcy code as well as the other reforms are just the opening, and opening of the floodgates, if you will. From now on, you can expect, we should all expect an acceleration. So if the government does not accelerate on these reforms, the low-hanging fruit, the easy-to-do stuff, then I think we should all complain.
Okay, we'll all come back and we'll talk to you and complain about it, Surjit, in case no movement is happening here. But Dr. Bhalla, always a pleasure talking to you. And as a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, we hope you're going to be giving him distinct advice on what to be done and all of that. Well, let's just now move to somebody else really significant and important in the entire drive to make India an easier place to do business. Amitabh Kant, the CEO of Niti, Aayog, also joining us here on Reality Check. Amitabh, thank you so much for talking to us. It's to move from 142 to 100 on the ease of doing business in 2-3 years is a signal achievement. But obviously still a lot more needs to be done to get to the top 10 or top 20. Some of what is remaining, is it relatively low-hanging fruit, like starting companies? How do you do that with Startup India? That should be possible. How do you digitize land records? Some of these steps can perhaps be taken soon.
Vikram, a number of measures have already been taken, but the World Bank methodology, they follow a very professional approach, and it's a global methodology which they follow. It's not about what you have done, but whether that process has been fully implemented 100% on ground, and whether third-party respondents have verified that fully. And there are a whole range of respondents working on this. So if you follow, we've done a lot on starting business. For instance, the government of India has taken a vast number of measures on that. We've taken a large number of measures on constructing permits, and on registering property, and on trading across borders. All these four, we've taken a vast number of measures, and I think these measures have not yet been recognized by the World Bank. And probably in the next year or the year after, you'll see again a quantum jump because of the vast number of measures which have been taken. In reality, while we've moved up in ranking on 6 of the 10 indices, in distance to frontier, we have moved in 9 out of the 10 indices. And therefore, we are actually benchmarking against the world's best. The only indice on which India has not moved forward and which is a source of worry is enforcement of contract, where it's still taking 4.5 years. There's a huge amount of time and cost on getting verdicts in commercial court cases. So that's an area of worry. But in all the other 4 other parameters, starting a business, construction permits, registering a property, and trading across border, I'm quite hopeful that we'll see significant jumps in the next 2 years, because a lot of that will get implemented on ground, and India will make a quantum jump forward.
Amitabh, if you could ask you, one thing is to look at what the World Bank actually rates this ease of doing business index on. But if you had to ask people anecdotally, actual people working on the ground, they will still point to a lot of Inspector Raj, petty bureaucracy, hassles, red tape at the grassroots levels, people coming and harassing them. Those sort of issues are still very pervasive. Not so much the high-level red tape, but the red tape that you're encountering on a day-to-day basis. What can you do about that? That's also where a lot of corruption arises from.
Yeah, so Vikram, over the last 70 years, we've added a lot of rules, regulation, procedures, paperwork, and actually we've made India very complex and complicated and a difficult place to do business in. But in the last 3 years, this government has actually been quite determined about knocking out many of these rules, regulation processes. A huge amount of dismantling has been done. And secondly, what the government has said, put everything online, digitize everything, cut out human interface. And so a huge effort towards digitization and cutting out human interface. And secondly, we are a large country. And large countries find it very difficult to jump up. It's quite unprecedented that a large country like India has jumped up 30 positions. But the key to this is what DIPP has been doing, and that is making states compete with each other. So this competition among states, ranking them, naming and shaming them, has led to radical changes done by the states. And states like Telangana, Andhra, and states like Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, and these are mineral-rich states. So if they start improving, the eastern belt of India improves. These states have done radical changes in the way business is done, and I think there's nothing better than making competitive federalism work on ground.
Right. So competitive federalism, getting states to compete, is one important aspect of it. We have seen states working together in areas like GST, for example, which is a separate issue where states have come together in a collaborative method to try and ease business. Doesn't always lead, though, to the right direction. I mean, GST itself, for example, could have been much simpler to implement and to execute than it has been. So obviously, you have your work cut out for you.
Yeah. So, GST has been a process, it's been a radical transformation, moving from so many central and state taxes to one tax. It was also a process of consensus building across states. But this government is a responsive government. So once it realized that there were some issues, it immediately acted and made things simpler and easier. And I think as we go along, as the GST evolves over a period of time, you'll find things getting simpler and simpler.
Amitabh, before I allow you to go, one quick thing. We've seen some of the numbers coming out on digital payments, where 22% up in transactions. The value growth not quite the same. UPI is up from a very small base. Is the amount of digital payments that we're doing, is it satisfactory, you feel, right now?
No, Vikram, you've got to see this in perspective. The latest figures have just come out. And if you look at the BHIM UPI transactions, I mean, they've grown from 16 million in August 17 to 77 million in October 17. And in just a 3 months period, you've had a 4x growth. This is unprecedented. It's never happened anywhere else in the world. If you look at electronic payment of electricity bills through the Bharat bill payment system, it has grown 30 times April to September 2017.
Although, Amitabh, it would be from a low base, right? So
Absolutely.
you have high growth rates and the base is low.
Yeah. So, you've just given a push to digital payment. It's low base, fine. But we see the quantities growing in a big way. But I think more important than anything else is this whole push towards digitization through what we call the PFMS mandate for all government agencies. All government transactions happen through that, which is digital transaction. And I think more important than that is DBT, being direct benefit transfer, being used for all our welfare schemes in government. And we are doing about the DBT savings to the government has been over 1 lakh crore, which is humongous. And I think this has really enabled ease of doing business in many, many ways and savings for the government. So government has truly adopted digital means to transfer funds and to create accountability and transparency, which was critical for the government.
All right, Amitabh, Kant, thank you so much for joining us with that perspective. And let me get the rest of my panel in now, specifically on that question around digital payments and whether they are moving fast enough. One of the areas that, if you think of the logic of demonetization almost exactly a year ago, it was one of the things that was supposed to be pushed. And these figures that you can see, 24% jump in the number of digital transactions a year later, not perhaps concomitant growth in actual value. What does this actually mean? So Prashanto Kumar Roy now joining us. Prashanto, your take on the digital payment numbers that we are seeing, is this signifying a substantial improvement in the ease of making payments? Because that's the other aspect of ease of doing business. The logic of demonetization was it'll be much easier. You can do everything digitally in a manner that you couldn't do earlier.
The fact is that we have seen a number of things. We've seen a spike in digital payments. We've seen a spike in the number of types of payment instruments. And I think what's happening now is that apart from the e-wallets, we are seeing a lot of the global players coming. There's Google, there's PayPal, there's WhatsApp itself, which is introducing. So we're going to see a really heated up and very competitive payment environment, and hopefully a lot more happening on the digital payments front, where some of the areas, there was some great work done by a committee which was chaired by Mr. Bhalla of Niti Aayog. And I think many of the recommendations of the committee are yet to be implemented, but when they are, I believe a lot more speed will be seen in the digital movement.
Bipin, the year after demonetization, you saw that report which has just come on the number of e-payments taking place. Obviously, the growth rates are highest in UPI, but that's not a big deal because UPI was almost negligible. So if there's 22,000% growth, it's not that great. Mobile wallet companies, how are you seeing yourself a year later? In the ease of doing business that we've been talking about, are you finding it much easier now? And the traction that you got during demonetization, is it still there with you?
So to give you a context, the number of merchants who used to accept digital payments in India was about maybe 1.5 million, maybe 2 million a year ago. That number today stands 10 million. The number of people who tried any form of a digital instrument would have been maybe 50 to 60 million a year ago. That number is well over 100 million, maybe 150 million today. And I think that has all happened due to demonetization. Overall, yes, some of it has tapered off, let's say over the last few months, as the cash has come back into the system. But overall, we are still maybe 50% higher levels than compared to where we were a year ago.
Okay, let me just get Venu and Professor Kumar, and let's just look at the data if we can, and we'll put this up on the screen for you. If you look at it, electronic payments since demonetization, monthly volume at 833 million is up something like 24%. Monthly value at about 100 lakh crores is up 5.5%. This is the latest data that's actually coming out. Biggest growth obviously is in UPI, 22,000 or thereabouts. Value for that also up. Mobile banking though is not in the actual value, it's actually come down a little bit.
Yeah.
What is your data showing you, Venu? Because you also analyze the data and the numbers that we...
So Vikram, I don't agree with what Vikramjit said. He said that now that cash has come back, we are still 50% up compared to demonetization period, which is not true because the biggest volume is generated by debit credit card together value. So in December it went up in December 52,000 crore debit credit together. And January 48,000 crore, but now last 4-5 months average is down to about 40 to 43,000 crore. So the narrative that demonetization has given a huge leap doesn't bear out, and that's probably, Vikram, because simple. The elephant in the room is point of sale machine. India is among the lowest penetration of point of sale machine, which
but that's for the digital cards is coming in. Bipin Preet, let me just get you in on this. Point of sales machines, obviously there aren't that many in the country.
I'll give you, we have 700 point of sale machines per million population, whereas Brazil is 30,000, Russia, China above 4,000.
But I guess Bipin Preet's argument and Paytm's argument and the government, the Google Pay's argument is, why do you need point of sale machine? Use mobile wallets. Wouldn't that be your point, Bipin Preet?
Yeah, so exactly. So I think there's been some increase in the point of sale machines, but in this country you cannot get point of sale machines to everywhere simply because of the cost and the hardware that is involved. And that is why, you know, I'm saying that a number of merchants who accepted digital payments is already close to 10 million over the last 12 months, whereas with the point of sale machines, that number is about, you know, 1.5 to 2 million overall in this country. So clearly there's been a huge jump in the acceptance infrastructure. Yes, on the consumer side, some of the, because the cash came back, so some of the usage went down, but I can bet that overall in terms of the acceptance over the last 12 months, the usage has gone up by 50%, and what we are seeing, at least in the mobile wallet industry, in our industry, the QR code has become the new POS.
But not in value terms, because debit credit cards are the biggest chunk of the value.
Well, cash should be the largest, then debit cards, but these are the new businesses that are coming up. Professor Arun Kumar, obviously the growth should be the highest in all of these, but in absolute size, are we where we thought we should be a year later? To have a, you were never going to digitize all payments within a week or a month or a year. You know, it takes time to do it. When you're seeing these numbers, how is the trajectory panning out? Is it as expected, lower or higher?
No, the trajectory was expected to be much higher. I mean, that's what the expectation of the government was, that people will very quickly move towards digitization, and that's why they initially said cashless economy. So only later on they modified it to be less cash economy, realizing that this was not going to happen that rapidly. I would like to make a following point. You see, it's the unorganized sector which is unable to deal with actually banking and electronic, etc., where the real problem lies. In the formal sector, in the organized sector, this was already happening. This was already going to happen sooner or later. So in a sense, there was an acceleration because of the demonetization, and then there was a tapering off as cash became more available. And that's what the data shows, that there was a huge peak in December, and then it came down. Then it peaked in March when the taxes had to be paid. Then it again came down. Then it again rose. So in other words,
but with 10 million potential people using it.
So potential does not mean actual usage. You see, so
Bipin Preet is saying that there are 10 million people who can accept digital payments right now, which is
fair enough. And also many more people who have tried it at least once. That's what he's saying. And that was expected to happen, because when you force people into certain kind of transactions, they'll happen. But the question is, have the habits changed? Has the financial literacy increased? You know, is cyber security more? Is the regulation is more? Because without all that, this can be very temporary.
Growth rates on UPI from the data that we are now seeing is obviously very high, but from a negligible base. Is the actual size of UPI big enough according to you? I think it's 6,600 crores, what the government seems to be saying. Satisfactory or less than satisfactory?
No, I think it's okay. You know, I mean, when we last spoke about this a few months ago on one of your shows, again, you know, the growth rate was maybe 1,000%, but it was like maybe 1,000 transactions or 10,000 or something like that. So we moved from there. But UPI really has a long way to go, and I don't agree that, you know, you can't have everything on the smartphone and you'll have to depend on feature phones, because UPI does need smartphones if you have to use you know, usable apps like Bheem for it, because other things like USSD and all have not really worked very easily. So you're going to have to look at, and you know, you really, I think the way forward is to look at things like QR code, which completely overtake. I mean, you know, you've got one Paytm, which is some 220 million or something users, and you've got 28 other PPIZ wallet companies. And by the way, all of the transactions are not being captured in terms of volume, because, you know, the RBI is really getting data for when the money is transferred from a KYC compliant bank account into an e-wallet. And there's a lot of transaction that is happening within there which is not getting captured. So I think UPI, there's a long way to go.
Last question, Bipin Preet. A year from now, second anniversary of demonetization, what percentage of transactions do you think will be digital?
1 year from today, I think the percentage of transactions overall which will be digital should be, if we can get at least 30 to 40% growth over the next 1 year, I think demonetization would have served its purpose.
You're still not saying what would be your prediction?
I want to de-link digitization with demonetization. You know, the same thing could be achieved, I'm sure they'll all agree, if the government had really advertised and put other incentive structures for use of digital media.
We'll see how that particular, how the growth and the trajectory actually pans out. But this is the way e-payments seem to be doing right now. Distinct growth 22%, but in value terms, perhaps not quite as much as it could be. Thank you all so much for having been with us. That's Reality Check. We'll be back again tomorrow. Bye for now.